Hey, what is up everyone? I'm Alex and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how you can build this modern dresser slash baby changing table. As with most of my builds, I began by breaking down the plywood sheets for the four sides of the cabinet. Then I ripped a few strips of walnut hardwood for the edge banding. Keep in mind that the edge banding needs to be wide enough so that when we cut the 45-degree bevels on the front edge of the four panels, that blade won't cut past the hardwood edging and end up revealing the ply. After the glue has had time to cure, I came back and flushed everything up with my hand plane and a flush trim saw. The next thing I did was use a router and an edge guide to cut a rabbet on the back of all four sides for a 1/4 inch thick back panel. Here, I'm cutting the bevel on the front side of each panel. Now you can see why I said earlier that the width of the edge banding was important. And with the blade still set for 45 degrees, I cut the miter joints for all the panels. With all the panels cut, I began working on the dado for the main vertical partition. For this, I like to first line up the panels and clamp them down so that I can cut the dado in one pass, that way their positions will come out identical. After setting aside the top and bottom panels, I cut one more dado into the left panel for the main horizontal partition. Here, I marked out and glued in some dominoes to help me align and reinforce the miter joints. For now, I only glued up the two sides to the bottom since there will be more dados to cut. I used these clamping squares to help ensure that the panels remain at 90 degrees during the glue up, and things will go pretty quick if you have four hands like me. Here, I'm using these clamps as spreaders to remove any sag from the top panel to measure for the vertical partition. I don't have any footage of this, but with the vertical partition dry assembled, I laid out and cut the dado for the main horizontal partition, matching the position cut into the left panel earlier. It's always best practice to do dry assemblies and cut things to fit rather than cutting based off of some numbers from a plan. Next, I cut a strip of walnut for the edge banding on the front of the vertical partition. This piece will have 45-degree miters on either end so it can sit flush to the top and bottom panels. After putting the edging piece on the vertical partition, I noticed I cut these dados too far. You see, the horizontal partition needs to sit back far enough to allow the drawers to fit inside of the cabinet opening. But if the dados are too long, they'll be visible when someone opens the drawers. I'll throw up an image in case that doesn't make any sense. Luckily, the fix was pretty simple for this. Next, I laid out and cut the dados in the vertical and horizontal partitions to accept the smaller dividers on top for housing the top drawers and the cubbies. It was around this time that I realized I had a problem. You see, the cubbies are basically MDF boxes, so they have a certain heft to them. Plus, cubbies are used to store things, so there will be even more weight in the future. All of that will sit on this long span of unsupported horizontal shelf, so I knew there had to be an additional vertical support underneath. My dilemma was that splitting this lower section meant I had to split the lower drawers, which in my opinion just didn't look very good. But for structural integrity, I decided to put in the lower vertical support, after which I glued in the main partitions as well. We'll revisit these drawers in a minute. By the way guys, if you have any questions for me on the build or any other woodworking related questions, feel free to leave them here in the comments section or send me a DM on Instagram at bevelish_creations, link in the descriptions. With most of the structure done, I cut the back panel to fit and glued it in. This will allow me to remove all the clamps and prevent any racking that may occur. As with most of my cabinet builds, I like to remove the top before applying finish. That way I don't have to get in weird positions to reach those tight spaces. Plus I have one more dado to route on the underside of the top panel, which is the last vertical support that separates the top cubby and the top drawer. Again, I don't have any footage of me making this dado, but you can see me applying glue to it, which is equally exciting. And finally, it's time to attach the top. With all the dry assemblies I did, I wasn't really worried about things not coming together, but it still took a little bit of effort to line up the tenons with the mortises. With the cabinet carcass complete, I started cutting half-inch MDF panels for the cubbies. Painting the MDF was actually pretty simple. Just sand them down with 150 grit, apply primer, and then apply at least a couple layers of paint. Just remember to tape up the glue surface before painting. And with the cubbies fitted into the cabinet, I moved on to cutting and installing the drawer boxes in the door. This was actually the first time using this hinge jig, and I'd have to say it's pretty awesome. This thing made installing the door just an absolute breeze. Next, I moved on to making the legs. My initial design was to use these splayed legs with bridle joints. Then I realized that would make this dresser over 38 inches tall, which would make it a pain in the to use as a diaper changing top. Luckily, I remembered the legs that Chris Salomone made for his Redemption TV stand and realized those were perfect for this application because aesthetically they worked with this dresser, and now the dresser can be dropped down to 34 inches tall, which was very comfortable height for changing diapers 50 times a day. I'm just gonna throw up a link to his video since he explained it much better than I would be able to, so go check it out. Here, I'm using a Forstner bit to mortise out some spots for the figure 8 fasteners that are used to attach the legs to the cabinet base. The way these things work is that one side is attached to the legs and the other to the cabinet base, and the two mount points become pivots so that it allows the wood to expand and contract freely. After the legs were attached, I moved on to making the drawer fronts. I used cherry for the two middle drawers. The drawer fronts will be 20mm thick, so I resawed it on my table saw since I don't have a bandsaw yet. But here's some sweet slow motion to make up for that fact. Next, I used this single piece of 8-foot long 4/4 inch walnut hardwood for the bottom drawer as well as the topper for the changing table. First, I used my hand plane to clean up some of the tool marks from the lumberyard so that I can find the best grain pattern for the drawer front. Once that's determined, I made the cross cut to separate the pieces. Since the drawer front's wider than my jointer, I first had to remove the blade guard in order to run the board through. Just take caution when doing this. Next, I took my hand plane to flush up the non-jointed material. This gave me a perfectly flat surface to use as reference when put through the planer to get it down to the final thickness. And after the board was milled down to its final size, I attached it to the drawer boxes. Yep, that's right, I attached each single drawer front to 2 drawer boxes. After scouring the internet for a day, I couldn't find any examples of this, but I decided to do it anyway just to stay with my original design. And to my surprise, everything worked as I imagined, except for one little detail. If you used soft close drawers before, then you know you have to exert an extra amount of force at the beginning of the travel in order to load the closing mechanism. Well, now I just doubled the amount of force acting against me. And the solution seemed pretty obvious, just replace 2 of the soft close slides with regular ones. But Chris gave me a better solution, and that's to just remove the pistons. This was a lot easier since the other option might lead me to having to take apart both the drawer assemblies and realign everything. I chose to keep the soft close mechanism on the 2 slides mounted to the middle partition since my drawer pull is in the middle. This allows me to distribute the force evenly against the soft closing mechanisms. The drawers open a lot easier now, but still maintains the soft closing features. Next, I moved on to making the topper for the changing table, which is pretty straightforward. It's just 4 sides, a center partition to separate the changing pad and the wipes, and a 1/2-inch walnut veneer ply underneath. Here, I'm laying out the 1/2-inch rabbet that I'll cut into the side faces to receive the ply for the bottom. First, I set the blade to the correct height to make a rip through all 4 pieces for the depth of the rabbet. Then I set the blade and fence to make a 90-degree cut for the height, which in this case is the thickness of the bottom panel. Next, I used my table saw and dado blades to cut a dado into each of the 2 long side pieces for the middle divider to sit in. And the last thing I did before gluing everything up was cut a chamfer on all of the pieces, just for giggles. Lastly, for mounting the topper to the dresser, I found these L brackets at the home center for about $2 that was just perfect for the application. To avoid splitting the plywood, I first pre-drilled before screwing in the brackets since I'm drilling into the edge of the ply. I learned a lot from this project. One major takeaway is that we work with a very flexible medium. It'd be rare for you to ever make a mistake that cannot be fixed. If you hit a wall, don't rush to scrap the project. A solution will always present itself if you just take a step away from it for a bit. Even if the solution is one that nobody's done before, it doesn't mean it won't work. Sometimes, maybe being stubborn will pay off in the end. If you guys like this video, feel free to give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my new videos. If you want to check out more behind the scenes of what I'm currently working on, give me a follow on Instagram where I try and post daily build updates and random tips that I think people will find helpful. And once again, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video.